This is big. This is really big.
Fish on First live, presented to you by LaPop. That is LAPOP. Very small group here today, but Isaac is going to hop in and out. We have Eli Sussman as usual, and then we have a Fish on the Farm guy here. We have Alex Carver, obviously, but we have Daniel DeVivo, his partner in crime. Daniel, thank you for hopping on.
Hey guys, it's always such a great pleasure. Makes me very happy to be here. I love the team, and also happy for the actual Marlins. So beautiful stuff.
As much as I want to talk minor leagues today, we got to talk about the evident fact that the Marlins just swept the Braves for 3-game sweep of the Atlanta Braves. I think we could start there. Oh God, Isaac, we could start there. And Eli, if you want to put up all 3 games, and Isaac Marlins take all 3 against Atlanta. I mean, when you look at it, this is the first time I think ever that we've had all Marlins on each game.
Yeah, well, what Brave would you put on there? They did nothing. Across the board. This was, by any measure, the most. Was it actually you, Daniel, that put out a tweet about whether? No, that was Mike Picardi, I think, that put out a tweet about how this was the best series of Marlins season, and it's really hard to disagree, by any measure, because to put up as many runs in a 3-game span as the Marlins have ever put up in any 3-game span, to do it against a Braves team that not at 100% strength, but still used 2 of their legitimate starting pitchers. They still use Bryce Elder and Charlie Morton, and Morton himself has quite a history of good performance against this Marlins team. And with the exception of the series finale, not having Jorge Soler, and they certainly felt his absence just earlier in the week against the Brewers, having him out of the lineup. It has been such an unusual second half and a really inconsistent second half for this team, where one series is not indicative of what's going to happen the very next series. There seems to be almost there's very few common threads from a few days to the next with this team right now, where sometimes they do look like this really formidable contender, and other times they look pretty hapless. And for this to happen against this Braves team that by any measure is the best opponent you can face is extremely invigorating. And you can't really just single out one guy, even though Jazz is the one that gets the headlines because he hit grand slams in back-to-back days. This was Jake Berger had in perhaps the most consequential hit of the entire series in game 2. And if not him, maybe you could say Jacob Stallings had the most consequential hit. It's really tough to split hairs between who it is that had the biggest impact on here, and to have it punctuated at the end by an amazing start from Jesus Luzardo, who he himself has been really inconsistent as this season has rolled on. But to have him kind of just reinforce what he's capable of, even when I didn't think he was really on his A game. I thought he was pretty good, but I didn't feel like he necessarily had his very best command and his most consistency with each of his pitches, and yet able to put up 6 shutout innings in there. It was to have them perform this way and to have some of the other games in the wild card race go the way that they wanted to now find themselves in control of their own destiny. This was awesome.
Yeah. Danny, just quickly, your thoughts on this series. Obviously, Eli quickly touched up on Jake Berger, but after a really just horrid series in Milwaukee, comes back and just slugs over 1,500 batting average. Just couldn't have asked for a better series for someone like Jake Berger. And then we'll get into a rise because he was special too in this series.
Man, the first thing for me as a Marlins fan, it's so satisfying to finally get these guys, because it's been humiliation after humiliation. We have all been dreading this series. We've been like, for 2 months, we've been like, oh, and then it's a Brave series. Like we all expected a sweep. Maybe we get 1 out of 3, but to have these guys kind of come in and tell everyone in the country we're here. We're not just beating the Royals like that's the joke, right? Oh, you beat Oakland, you beat the Royals, big whoop, you beat Washington. I mean, this is the Braves. Sure, no Acuna 2 days, but this is a crazy lineup, man. And they didn't just beat them. It's how many runs differential? Like 23 between all three games. I can do the math here. 3, 6, 14. Yeah, so 23. And that's a crazy way to win. And that's satisfying to see it happening. And it's just, hey, we're here. That's what they said. In terms of just kind of individual players, I mean, it's Jazz. You really need him to turn on those motors for this couple weeks left. If he's on, like you can really believe it. And regarding what you said, Eli, on you just never know with the Marlins. Like from one day they're like, okay, we're eliminated, and then we're good. It's happened a million times. I can't tell you how many times this season I've been like, okay, yeah, with that game, it's clear we're out of this. And then they just come back and win the Dodgers series and sweep the Braves. So that's why everybody's nervous about the Mets, about what's coming, right? Because we should beat them, but you just don't know. And we're going to talk on that in a short few moments, but you just don't know with this team. It's exciting, but it's also torture.
Yeah. Isaac, let's talk a little bit about Jesus Luzardo. Obviously, put up a great start. I believe he shut out the Braves. I don't think he allowed those last 2 runs. Just take us through, what he did.
Well, yeah, Eli mentioned the inconsistencies for him in the second half. He just went through that brutal start. For his first 3 starts in the month of August was just atrocious. And then since then, he really fixed something mechanically. And he just went quality start after quality start, going, I think, 3 consecutive starts of 6 innings or more with less than 3 earned runs. And then he hit a little bump in the road, obviously. But then, hey, to come back against inarguably the best offense in baseball was huge. And going for the sweep in a Sunday day game with a full house at Lone Depot Park, a former Marlin fan in Jesus Luzardo, was just awesome to see. And this is what we've been waiting for. 20 years in the making for the Dolphins are about to have week 3, and the Marlins are still relevant. So this is awesome.
There, you wanted to see that. There you go. I'm going to make it bigger.
Oh, yeah, Daniel mentioning just every time you think they're out of it, I guess that hard rise after the beginning of September is after the 4-game sweep of the Nationals. Then you lose 3 out of 4 in Milwaukee and you think it's over. Like Daniel mentioned, there's just so many back and forth. I think they dropped to 11% when they were swept by Tampa Bay in that 2-game set at Lone Depot Park. And that's when I admittedly thought it was over.
I'm going to put up the MLB wild card right now, just so we could take a look at that. Obviously, as I think it was mentioned, Miami right now basically has their own destiny in this current moment. So we'll just go over that very quickly. Unless Eli, actually, do you have the wild card standings up quickly for you?
Of course. First of all, yes, I can show you the wild card standings you want first. Wild card standings you shall get.
Beautiful. I already put up the graphic that Isaac would want it up, so we went over that. And think on your back because I did not know what I was doing.
This is the second time in a short span where the studio has cramped up on me. It happened at the same time when I was cross-streaming State of the Fish on Sundays, something that I invite more people to tune into every Sunday on our Marlin Spaces Twitter account.
So as I think, just as kind of we were mentioning, Miami holds their own destiny. They hold the tiebreaker, I believe, over every single team except San Francisco, I want to say. So generally, where Miami ends up, if Miami somehow ends up tied with any of these teams, they're the ones going in. So Danny, just how are you seeing this unfold? Which teams kind of stand out to you? I think I was talking to Isaac and Eli before, and Arizona has a fairly easy schedule. They face the Yankees, and then they faced the White Sox, which obviously one of the worst teams in baseball.
It's very mid. I think that's a term that's been used. You think of the Cubs, you think of the D-backs, you think of Cincinnati. They all have like these glaring holes in some part of their game. So I couldn't tell you like, oh, this team's going in for sure. The Cubs are really interesting because they have like this week Pirates and I don't remember who's the other team that they play, but it's extremely easy, obviously, in theory. But then the last week they play the Braves in Atlanta and they play the Brewers in Milwaukee. So they're going to have a really rough week to finish it off. The Giants, they seem to be on the outside looking in, but you just don't know. I can't say like I'm really scared, afraid of any of these teams, to be honest. I mean, I think Marlins, I think as long as they don't get swept, they can probably lose one series. They win the other three. I think they're in, man. It's exciting.
I do think we were talking about this. Sorry, Eli. That the earliest this team Miami would be able to clinch is in New York. Unlikely. It would probably come down to the final game of the season. But again, if everything goes right for Miami, they would be able to clinch in Queens. So before I go to Eli, Isaac, I think we were talking about this. What makes Arizona so scary? This is a team that you kind of you pointed out, you made it clear. Obviously, they have Gallen, they have Kelly, they have some pretty good, a very young team, but very good team overall. Just kind of had its up and downs this season with injuries as well.
Yeah, they're sort of a little bit similar to San Francisco, but they just didn't hit for a long time, Arizona. But now when they are hitting and when Zach Gallen is doing his thing and Merrill Kelly, it's just a dangerous team. And like we mentioned, there's a reason why Eli thought they had a chance at winning the division. It's a very dangerous team, in my opinion. I wasn't surprised that they beat the Cubs. I think they are better than the Cubs. I think they are maybe slightly better than the Marlins, if not neck and neck with Miami. So I think those are the two teams you got to watch. So if I'm another team like Cincinnati or Chicago or San Francisco, I'm looking at those two teams. And they as well have the highest playoff percentage odds, according to Fangraphs, both above 50%, and the rest of the field is below 50. So keep that in mind. Not that it means anything at all, but just something for fans to keep an eye on. And yeah, Arizona, like you said, they have the tiebreaker over all of those teams, which I would usually say, screw that. I want to play game 163. But I'm sure, the Marlins and company would much prefer to own the tiebreaker.
Eli, anything you wanted to add? I know you were going to say something.
Well, I think we summed it up pretty well. Yeah, all these teams on top of each other. Still no clarity whatsoever in this race with a couple weeks ago. The tiebreakers help to clarify for them to officially sew up their tiebreaker against the Reds. It comes down to performance against teams in your own division. And the Marlins have been – that's why this Braves series was especially big for tiebreaker purposes, because that improves their in-division record, whereas the Reds have lost the vast majority of those games. The Marlins are 24-22 inside the division, and the remaining Mets games are the only games they have coming up against NL East teams. So these series against the Mets are more important than the ones against the Brewers and the Pirates. I think that's pretty unequivocal for that reason, because it helps them secure that tiebreaker over the Reds. And for the Giants at the moment, the Giants have a slightly better winning percentage in their own division, but most of their schedule remaining is in their own division. They have a lot of games still to go to sway that potentially one way if they continue to not free fall, but they've been, of this group, they have been slumping in the biggest way over an extended period of time. Offensively, they are just depleted. They just don't have any real standout hitters. For a lot of the season, Wilmer Flores was kind of carrying their offense, and that's not a guy that you want to put too many of your hopes on. They finally explode for a bunch of runs yesterday in Colorado, and they almost blew that game. They were up 9-0 at one point, and they ended up clinging on 11-10. That has been their main downfall, as well as their starting pitching situation. Even though for the Marlins, it feels they're kind of thin in their rotation, that's nothing compared to the Giants, who for most of this year have gone with a 2 to 3 man rotation. And then every other day is just creative bullpenning because they don't trust anybody else to work deep. They are to me, the worst team of this group. And for the Marlins to already be ahead of them, have a 2-game cushion over them, that makes me think pretty likely that's going to be 2 spots for 4 teams between those second and third wildcard spots, between the D-backs, Cubs, Marlins, and Reds. I'm pretty close to crossing off the Giants, but their next 2 games, as we showed before, about to play the D-backs head-to-head. So that's really their last gasp to me, is if they win this series against the D-backs, then maybe I start to feel that they're kind of back in this thing. But otherwise, they just look undermanned compared to the rest of these contenders.
So before we talk about, go ahead, whoever was going to.
I think you just heard the beeping from Crutchik, our press box report coming up shortly.
That's exactly where I was going to go to. Let's go to our press box report. Obviously, as most of the time now, it seems we will have someone there. Alex Crutchik is joining us from Lone Depot Park, where I think today's $5 beers and $5 burgers. Crutchik?
Yes, that's a big headline.
Yeah. What's up, Alex?
Yes. We're out here today, a little Mets versus Marlins. We haven't seen that in a few months. Skip said before the game, it's hard to prepare. Well, he didn't say it was hard. He said it was hard to use the games from April to prepare for a game like this because the fabric of their team has changed so much. As for injuries, because I know that we'll get to it, Sandy had a second bullpen today. He said he felt really good. He said that he hopes to pitch again this season, and Skip was, as usual, didn't want to commit one way or the other, but he didn't shut down the idea entirely. As for Brian De La Cruz, when I first got here, he was doing some mobility drills, running forward, running backward, doing a side lateral. So moving in all directions, looked pretty good, each direction that he was running in. And also, I don't know if it was on the field before I got here or if it was underneath the stadium, but he was also doing some hitting. And Skip said that he could be available tonight depending on how he feels after BP. So not in the starting lineup, of course, but we'll see if maybe we see him later.
Daniel, anything you want to add on to?
So did we already go on DLC? We mentioned Jorge Soler, mentioned primarily DH rest of the way. They want to ease him up just in the DH role. He'll potentially get some spots in the outfield, but for right now, your primary DH looks like it will be Jorge Soler the rest of the way. Nothing really much. We haven't gotten an injury report yet, so we're still waiting on the Sixto news just to see if he's still, alive, I guess. But yeah, everything looks good. Mets fans travel well. They always do. A lot of Mets fans here. But overall, on the field, we saw Avi. I don't know if Alex mentioned that. Avi on the field prior to the game, getting some minor baseball work there, just catching just ground balls and whatnot. Again, DLC, what Alex previously mentioned. David Robertson seems very popular with other Mets players here. A lot of players came up to him. You had Francisco Alvarez and Kodai Senga, which seemed like just totally opposites on the baseball spectrum. Going up to see David Robertson, and both guys who their primary language isn't even English, going up to David Robertson also, which really tells you the type of leader that he was to the Mets and what they really saw from him, where it showed like just different players of different cultures all looked up to him. No matter what position they are on the diamond. So I would say that's somewhat of a story or to really look at, and how David Robertson will compete against the Mets and how he does. Maybe he sees this as trying to be better than what he's been at since the Marlins. But yeah, that was a little bit, not want to say surprising, but a bit of an eye opener, just seeing how happy and he was and really joyful when the Mets players came up to him.
All right, we'll talk about Robertson later after the press box report. But Alex, I believe you guys spoke to some other guys today, Jake Berger being one of those. I believe John Birdie as well. Just what were those conversations like? Obviously, they're doing $5 burger night. I guess he was asked about that again, although they did it, I believe, the first day he was here in Miami.
Actually, I was there for that. It was
okay. Go for it.
We talked to Jake Berger and then Garrett Hampson. We can start off with him. He mentioned, I asked him the experience to be on this Marlins team, the chemistry that he's had with this team compared to other teams he's had in the past he's been on. He mentioned he really enjoys this team because the mix of veterans and younger players that are in here, maybe something he hasn't really seen before, but just having that winning attitude when you're able to have just different types of players, when you have guys who've been in the league 10 years, guys who've been in the league 10 months, really shows them being able to go together. And just Garrett also mentioned just staying ready for being to be able to be ready at any point in the game, at any point where Skip needs him. If he needs him at short, second, third, outfield, whatever. Hampson really mentioned being able to stay ready at a drop of a hat for Skip, and really mentioning that the chemistry. Jake Berger had nice things to say about Josh Bell and how he's been doing since getting traded, and those two guys in the relationship they've had together. Jake Berger kind of like the same thing with Garrett Hampson, mentioning the ability to get to the playoffs and the wild card spot, just staying focused game to game. Jake Berger really emphasized going 8-5 the last couple series. He mentioned the Brewers series was a bit of a disappointment, but he mentioned the Dodgers series and the Braves series as two focal points for the Marlins and for them at ending the season. But he mentioned going 8-5 against the Brewers, the Dodgers, and the Braves as a big lifting point for the team. and just staying strong the rest of the way. They know they mentioned they have the Mets, who they did not scoff. They know it's still going to be a tough competition against the Mets, and just taking one step at a time up until the playoffs, if they do make it. But hopefully they do. Just one step for Burger.
I guess, Krutchik, anything that stood out aside from what you guys already mentioned during Skip? Obviously, this is a team that holds their own destiny, and obviously, I think Skip may be starting to scoreboard watch once again. So, just anything on that end where he spoke about the playoffs.
Yeah, Skip definitely made a note that they're scoreboard watching, but also when it comes to beating specific teams, he kind of just stays neutral in terms of everyone. We have to beat everyone right now. And someone even asked during the scrum today, you're finally through the gauntlet of the Dodgers and the Braves and all that, and Skip made sure to correct that person and say, the gauntlet's not over. Like, the Mets are a good team too. So I think Skip is remaining pretty even-keeled, which is what you want out of your manager. And the players, of course, they're the ones that are out here saying we're excited about beating the Braves and stuff. You saw my article yesterday. Jazz was very excited. He said, we're not really worried about who we play because we know that we can play the Braves really well, so we know we can play everyone else really well. John Birdie told me that he didn't even learn anything over the weekend about the team. I asked him, what did you learn about this team over the weekend? He said, nothing that I didn't already know. We already knew that this was what we could be. And I think you saw that especially yesterday, where you've got 8 starters getting on base. You had a couple of bench guys get on base. You had Nick Fortes go 4 for 5 with a couple of doubles and a home run off of a position player. The guys, it was really important not only to sweep someone, but to take down the dragon, get the monkey off the back of the Braves. I think that going into these next 12 games, like the fact that they were able to beat a team that has had their number for 6 years, I think that is huge, and they know it.
And if you want to check out Alex Krutchik's article, amazing article, I will say, go to fishonfirst.com and you'll find it right there. Anything from you guys left at the ballpark? Obviously, I know you guys have your prediction video. Aside from that, just anything else worth pointing out?
Is there any approximation as to the Mets fan, Marlins fan split here? Because as we know, early in the season was not a Mets home game when they came in the opening series. How does that compare to what we're looking at right now?
I got to be honest with you. Right now, there's not a whole lot of people here. It is a Monday night at 5:54, so I would like to reconvene around 7. First pitch is at 6:40. I'd like to check back in on Twitter at 7 o'clock, because right now we are seeing the effects of Miami traffic.
I will say,
Sorry,
remember last season during opening day that they had that whole they took 2 sections down the first base line with those vice colored T-shirts that says something beat Miami or something like that. So.
No, they said coming from Queens or something about Queens. Are there any light pink shirts from Mets fans or no?
No, but Alex and I are matching, if that means anything to y'all. But that's it. Maybe don't really hear. There's no groups. There's no teams from New York or anything like that. It just seems like a normal day here at the ballpark, where of course you're gonna have Mets fans that live in the South Florida area come by. But yeah, just nothing much. Probably expecting maybe 10, 12,000 in attendance, maybe 15 if we're gonna really maximize it. But as of right now, what are 40 minutes prior to game time, there are probably more people in this live stream in total here at the ballpark, but it should hopefully get better as we approach first pitch. More on the Mets fans.
Alrighty, so Daniel, Alex, thank you so much. We'll obviously follow Daniel on Twitter, follow Alex on Twitter for tonight's coverage, obviously pre-game, during the game, and obviously post-game when we hear hopefully Skip talking about the Marlins win. So thank you guys, and just make sure to follow them.
Long live Sixto.
Alrighty, so I do want to talk about someone that is actually facing his former team, David Robertson. Obviously, so far not a very good Marlins tenure with an ERA of 6.89, FIP of 4.86. He was brought in here to save some games. He's only saved 4 games, but as we all know, David Robertson has been a part of a lot of postseason teams, going from the Yankees mainly, obviously Philadelphia last season. And throughout his time in the postseason, he's been pretty dominant. 2.78 ERA, 3.34 FIP. I don't see the amount of saves he has, but Isaac, I think this is a topic that we're mentioning. How much should we trust David Robertson in the postseason? This is a guy who played with Mariano Rivera. He learned from him. He was with those Yankee teams, obviously the Phillies last season, facing a really good Astros team.
Yeah, I think since he was removed from that closer role, you saw him sort of calm down a little bit and really pitch extremely well, in my opinion. He did have that rough one in game 1, I believe it was, against the Braves. He gave up 2 earned runs and didn't even finish the inning. But before that, he had 4 consecutive appearances of at least 1 inning, and he struck out 6, 7, 8, 9 guys in 4 innings pitched. So I think you will see him in a little bit of a higher leverage spot as the games go on. Obviously, like you mentioned, he's been there before. He has pitched in the highest possible leverage situations that one could be in. And I think that, once everything calmed down, Tanner Scott solidified as the closer. And I think you see some mixing and matching when it comes to the 8th inning. Nardi, if there's a couple of lefties in there. And even though Robertson has reverse splits, I still think you could see Robertson getting the 8th inning, for example, if it's mainly right-handed batters. We'll see.
Danny, anything you want to add on to what Isaac said? And obviously, I think we could talk a little bit about Tanner Scott here as well and the rest of this Marlins bullpen. I think the big thing is just the amount of times that these guys have been worked. I don't inning high for Nardi, obviously for Scott. I don't know where Chargois is right now, and innings. Okert probably has a career high. Just your thoughts on this Marlins bullpen, and specifically Scott and Robertson.
I mean, that bullpen has been nails. You guys remember the first half? It was so good. It was automatic pretty much. And kind of get angry at people who go hard against Puck. He was so good in that first half. Like, he was automatic. He obviously hit a horrible patch that coincided, that a word, with our losing streak. And people just, he just got on people's nerves and they don't want to see him anymore. But he's been doing great lately. So I'm fine with trusting Puck again. Nardi, I mean, obviously as a minor league analyst, I can call myself, I guess. I've since he was drafted, I like that kid, how he's jumped levels. He's been amazing. And everybody also was just wanted to give up on him after last year because of his however many innings he pitched in the major league level. He was so good in the minors against all types of competition, and he showed it and so beautifully this season. He has been trusted anywhere, anytime, against anyone, and you can kind of see it now. Like, he was throwing some 92, 93 mile per hour pitches 2 days ago, and I was pretty worried. I'm hoping that, this extra day, hopefully, it'd be beautiful if he doesn't have to pitch today either. But he's been amazing. And what can we say about Tanner Scott? That guy, just night and day compared to last year. He's been exactly or even better than what we dreamed when we got him. We always saw that stuff, but the walks, that was the huge issue. And it's not completely gone, but it's reduced so much that it's not an issue anymore. So he is cold-blooded, and I have absolute trust in that guy when I see him come in. So yeah, the bullpen has been amazing. Hopefully Robertson, can show us that experience that he has, because his numbers aren't horrible. Obviously his ERA is a little bit it's lying a little compared to that FIP, but the stuff is there. He should be able to help in that 7th, 8th inning moving forward, and hopefully that experience and that confidence, helps. So We'll see.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Puck, because I think he's the X factor of this bullpen. You guys mentioned people are so tough on him for that really rough stretch he had when he was blowing saves and giving up home runs to Christian Pache. But in his last 16 appearances since the 31st of July, since the trade deadline, he's struck out 24 guys in 16 innings pitched, only given up 4 earned runs for a 2.25 earned run average. He's been nails. And every time that we ask Skip about him, it seems like he says it's the best stuff we've seen from Puck. It seems like every time he said that a few times, actually. So I think he's the X factor of this team because he's shown that he can be a closer. He can be nasty against both lefties and righties. And I think he's going to get a lot of innings because, like you mentioned, Daniel, you can't run Nardi into the ground. They basically have done that with him. And you keep running him out there, he's going to start getting hit. So I think Puck is going to be huge for this Marlins team going forward.
I want to quickly mention Tanner Scott and just how good he's been in September. He has a 0 ERA in September and 10 strikeouts, only 1 walk. He's given up 2 runs on 5 hits. So it just shows how good he has been and really just solidifying himself as one of the best closers in the National League. I won't say baseball just yet, but definitely in the National League.
Why not? I don't know if there's anybody in the American League that's better than him. In fact, the best relievers in baseball seem to be skewed towards the NL.
Right?
It's Josh Hader, it's Devin Williams, it's Tanner Scott, and I think they're kind of in a tier all themselves. If you just focus on this,
the American League.
It's not only September for Tanner Scott.
Right.
In August, he had a 0.00 ERA. He is on one of the longest scoreless streaks in baseball. That doesn't even include the inherited runners that he stranded, including very recently. Which game was it that he stranded? Well, against the Phillies, there was that one time he came in the 8th inning, and with runners on 2nd and 3rd and only a 1-run lead, he stranded them and then went on and pitched a scoreless inning on top of that. And then, of course, against the Braves, come in with the bases loaded, and he got the double play that got not the double play, the ground out that got them out of the inning. Stranded 3 guys there, so there's not enough like adjectives for how amazing he's been. Really, the only downside is that it's going to be hard for the Marlins to afford him long term. Like, this is a guy, he has 1 more year of club control. He's a logical extension candidate, but I think people will be shocked by what his price would be if you tried to extend him this offseason, because guys like him, when the main concern historically was the lack of control, and when it seems like all of a sudden that has clicked for him, that his price is going to be soaring, and the Marlins should just be grateful right now for what they've gotten from him, because he single-handedly has made a very big difference between them being a 500-ish team versus them being in the position that they're in. He single-handedly has changed several games for them, especially lately.
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned that first pitch strike has also been a huge change for him. Obviously, last season, not very good at doing that. This is an organization from top to bottom that really focuses on getting ahead of the count very early on. And obviously, Tanner Scott doing that this season's definitely worked out. And, Eli, you may be making that case correctly that he may be one of the best closers in all of baseball right now.
Yeah.
I will say, it's funny enough, when you look at Fangraphs right now, Puck is the one who's the highest for the Marlins. When it comes to K per 9 and obviously walk per 9, he's the lowest. So interesting there. Obviously had a lot of runs as the closer this season.
Yeah, and just really quick to add to what you guys were saying about Tanner Scott, all of July, all of August, and so far in September, all those 3 months, 3 earned runs allowed, 3 earned runs in 35 innings pitched and 41 strikeouts. He is, arguably the best closer in baseball, easily. Best reliever. Bautista's on the IL. Hader gets hit sometimes. You put Tanner Scott in there, and what a trade that ended up being. Everyone, including the Fish on Farm guys, so upset about giving up Guerrero and whoever else it was. It ended up being a hell of a trade.
Antonio Velez.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Velez, oh my God, he's gonna be a stud. Carver would be yelling at us. But there's a chance we'll lose that trade too. So we'll see.
Last thing, super quickly, last thing, you mentioned the only thing he needed to fix really was the walks, and he cut him in half. It's 6.61 last year and 6.17 the year 2021 walks per 9, and this year it's 3.0. I mean, that's crazy to cut it in half.
And finally, before we go to Flip Fish, which I guess leads into the break, with Nardi, I mean, he is pitching a career high in, minors and major league included. He is currently right now at 51.2 innings pitched in. I mean, he's been able to hold a 2.79 ERA this season. He's been great. There's just no other way to say it. This guy, I will say, we were completely wrong on this guy. We made fun of this guy so much last season with Carver when he got called up, he had like a 19-something ERA. This guy's been, as Noah called said with Tanner Scott, he's been nails in the ninth. So we are doing our
Quick
flip
note.
fish. Go ahead.
Quick note on that is that he, to be fair, in 2022 he did pitch between 3 levels, around 65, almost 70 innings. So
Good.
he still should have something in the tank. Obviously, he had some injuries this year, so it may affect a bit more, but he should still have a little more to give.
Well, and that, I think Miami dodged a bullet when he got hit by that Harold Ramirez liner off the left hand, right in the left hand. He walked away scot-free. So Miami's very fortunate that he's still good.
Alrighty, it is time for Flipped Fish. Isaacs, I think this is episode 10. First time we're doing the Mets. A lot of interesting choices, but we'll let you guys choose who this one is here, and we'll put it up and for a couple seconds, and I think we'll go right on to the break to preview what should be a very fun series and very important one for Miami here as we move on. Marlins and Mets. We'll be back right after the break.
I just want, just to give a transition. We were talking about the bullpen now, so this is, as you can see here, a reliever based on how he's been used in his career. Can you figure out who this reliever is? A long Major League career, former Marlin, former Met. We will reveal it on the other side of the break.
So we have an answer, but I don't know if we should count it because I see about 3 to 4 L's on this answer. It is we'll give it to the loud Marlins fan here. I'm not gonna Heath Bell. That's the answer he gave us, but we'll let it slide. It is Heath Bell. Pitched 1 season with the Marlins. I don't know how long with the Mets, but
At the start of his Major League career was with the Mets.
Okay, look at that.
Yes. And only one very notorious year with the Marlins in 2012, and finished off his career not long after that. So now retired. Maybe the weight is a little bit generous. I think during his Marlins days, it was above. I would take the over on 235. Overall, a productive career. There was that stretch in there with the Padres. That was the prime of his career. He was a multi-time All-Star. Very famous moment sliding into the mound at the All-Star game. I think people still remember that pretty vividly. So a good career, just not with the Marlins, of course.
Yeah, and there were a lot of options that you guys could have gone with. Reliever Jeff Brigham could have been an option. Infielders Luis Castillo, Mike Jacobs, Gary Sheffield, Steven Tarpley was a great one that I liked. Carlos Delgado, Mike Piazza, a lot of fun ones.
John Curtis could have been one here too.
John Curtis could have been one. David Robertson could have obviously been one. So,
Jordan Yamamoto.
Yeah. Jimmy Yacobo.
Hey, that's the heck of a bonus trip. That's some tough vibes bringing up Heath Bell for this series, man. Come on.
Yeah,
gotta clean it up.
I thought it would be tough, but no, our fans continue to prove me wrong and be very smart.
Well, one of them.
We'll go next series.
Wasn't Curtis Granderson one we considered doing for this?
I was
going to
do Grandy Man, but it was too maybe famous of a name. I thought
Neil Walker.
Walker's a good one. There's a lot of fun names that you guys can keep commenting on. I think we're going to make this into a contest next time, or maybe next year.
Alrighty, so let's move on to what I think everyone's here for, Marlins Mets. Obviously, the last time we saw the New York Mets, it was a completely different team. They had their crazy pitching rotation with Scherzer. You had Verlander in there. They're both now gone. They still have most of their offensive pieces for the most part. This time around, I think one of their bigger ones is Ronnie Mauricio, who was recently called up by the Mets. He was their top prospect. He is now there. You saw Francisco Alvarez, who's a stud. Pete Alonso's there. We're seeing if he'll be a Met next season. I don't think we saw Luis Guillorme last time. He was on the IL. Omar Narvaez, very quick stint with them. He was injured last time. Mark Vientos wasn't there. So Danny, just talk to us a little bit about the Mets, man. Very, very different team from what we saw opening day.
He's lagging on us a little
within
bit.
that team. Yeah, it's lagging a little bit. You can hear me, right?
There, you're good.
Cool. They've always been that team that I feel has had our number. Probably not recently, but it makes me a little nervous. Like, I don't care if it's Verlander or Bate, however you pronounce his name. But you can still see that there's some star power in there. You got Lindor's. He's always going to be a pretty good guy. Nimmo, Pete Alonso. And so, yeah, obviously it makes me nervous. The Marlins just need to continue what they're doing, be aggressive. And yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. You know, you got guys here that can, you know, finish a game with one swing of a bat. But you just got to trust our guys.
Well, I thought he had faced Miami last season, Buto, and I guess that's just not the case. But he did not.
I remember him facing the Marlins in spring training.
That's where I remember him. Okay.
The one thing I will say about the Mets really quickly is I loved what they did at the deadline. I mean, which obviously means that I hate it, because I feel they're in a great position, you know, for the future. Obviously, they have the money. They'll always have the money. But now they're going to have the farm. Those trades that they made, especially that highway robbery with Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez. I don't want to touch too much on that. But several of those trades, the one with the Astros bringing in Clifford,
and Gilbert,
and of course Gilbert. That's a great trade. They traded, I think it was Pham to the Diamondbacks for really, really, really good DSL player. So I loved it for them, hate it for us. So I will say that it's pretty smart for them to just identifying and taking action with those trades. So they'll be good. If not next year, starting again in a couple of years, they'll be really good and up there. Definitely.
Yeah, and on top of that, they got Ronald Acuña's brother, Luis.
That's
Angel
right.
Acuña, another guy who's probably going to be up here very soon in the big leagues. Again, this is just a team that really stacked up their minor league system. Already, like, it went from one of like the middle tier farm systems to probably like a top 10, maybe even top 5 system. Gilbert, you mentioned there, Luis Angel Acuña. We won't talk about the system right now, but let's talk a little bit about Francisco Lindor, someone who's kind of always had the Marlins number for the most part. Eli, someone who's been probably one of the more consistent players for over the past couple of weeks for the Mets, and obviously at shortstop, he is one of the best when it comes to when you think about a defensive shortstop.
Yeah, and he's having another great season. 5.5 WAR is what I'm seeing here. I mean, for a lot of guys, that would be sensational. For him, that's average pretty much. He's paying up, living up to his contract, whereas that wasn't the case with some of these other guys on the team. The reason why they made some of those trades and they had to throw in a whole lot of money, a lot of their veterans were underwater, and Lindor is one of those guys who certainly is not. He's still pretty great, and he's still in the prime of his career, and he's still batting near the top of their lineup, still doing extremely well. Other than that, it is such an interesting combination now because it's split pretty much down the middle between the usual faces in their lineup versus the guys that are either journeymen or former top prospects. Like DJ Stewart is somebody I don't think I realized was in the Mets organization when these teams previously faced back in April. But since he got brought up and has had semi-regular opportunity, he's been the best hitter on their team. He doesn't play every single day. There's still a lot of suspicion as to how much he'll keep it up. But, I mean, he's got a 922 OPS this year. He's batting third ahead of Alonso for a reason, because he is 11 home runs in those 48 games, which is almost a similar rate as what Alonso hits him at. They may have found something in this guy who used to be a very early draft pick with his previous organizations. You touched on Mauricio. Extremely loud tools. He's already, the batted ball quality he's showing is pretty amazing already. Yeah. The question is they don't know exactly where to put him defensively at this moment. A little second base, now third base tonight. I think he's played some outfield already. He definitely did in the minor leagues before they called him up as well. He's been bouncing around in that particular way. Yeah. So I'm kind of aligned with Daniel here that even though this is a team that on paper is worse than the Braves are. Obviously, that doesn't mean that just because you swept the Braves that you can expect the same thing against this team. Like overall, they're not that much worse than the version that was stacked with stars from top to bottom. And I think it's fair to worry long-term about them being a big threat in this organization. We didn't touch on the fact that David Stearns has now taken over their baseball
I was
operations.
going to mention that, yeah.
I mean, that was the number one available front office guy that the Mets have been courting, not so subtly, for years. They've been trying to get him for good reason. There is reason to be intimidated long term. I just implore people to put themselves in the mindset they were at entering this year, where it seemed like the Mets were already far and above and out of reach. It already seemed that the Mets were set up to essentially stay at as an 100-win pace every single year, that the spending would be way too much to overcome. And the reality here that the Marlins can now clinch a better record than the Mets if they win this series was unthinkable entering the start of this season. It is the reason why people thought there was this hard ceiling on what the Marlins could accomplish, because it didn't seem like there was really a path to being a top 3 team in this division behind the Braves and the Phillies and the Mets. And even though their future now looks pretty bright, they have a lot of young talent coming through, especially after those trades. For a Marlins perspective, this is a much more desirable position to be in than what we thought we were in entering the year, where it seems like this team was already a tier above. So the fact that you at least have this window, at least for this year, and maybe even for next year as well, where it feels like they have a legitimate chance at being ahead of them before they really put everything together, that in itself is a win, in my opinion.
I will say I'm actually pretty excited to watch this team. I'll be there on Wednesday with Mr. Noah, and I'm excited to see guys like Mauricio Vientos. I was there for his debut, and I want to see Francisco Alvarez, someone we've actually never seen in person, play before. Maybe I caught him in spring. Maybe I remember. Maybe he played during spring training, one of those games, but can't quite remember. Let's look quickly on the Marlins side. Obviously, we won't. This is kind of the usual lineup for the most part. Luis Ariz leading off. He is 1 hit away from 200. Article will be dropping fairly quickly after that hit goes through. Hopefully it's the first at bat. Then you have Jorge Soler, who is the DH, as Daniel mentioned. Skip mentioned that they would kind of be building him back up. My opinion, I would not put him back in the outfield. But then you have Josh Bell hitting hitting third. Jazz again in that cleanup spot. Hampson, Wendell, Stallings, seems like that bottom of the lineup has kind of gotten some work in for the most part. Jacob Stallings kind of hitting pretty well, not as of late for the most part. Obviously had that bases clearing double. So Daniel, anything that stands out to you in the Marlins lineup? Obviously Wendell's, I guess, the odd man here when it comes to guys who've been really struggling as of late.
Something that stands out, just a super random thought is the batted ball data for Hampson. It's really bad. I hadn't noticed that. It's like down there, but I mean, he somehow, he gets those hits, man. So definitely respect for him. But no, as you mentioned, it's our standard lineup, obviously without DLC, and like nothing specific that stands out apart from they just keep throwing Wendell in there.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about the pitching matchups here. Obviously, I think the one that stands out of all 3 games here is Kodai Senga, who we'll see in the third and final game of the series. I believe that TBD will probably be Yuri Perez. We'll see. So that's going to be a very fun matchup, Senga versus Perez. Senga had debuted against the Marlins, and he dominated them with that fork. I think it's the fork ball, I believe is what they call it.
Ghost fork.
So obviously someone who will probably get consideration not only for NL Rookie of the Year, but maybe a couple Cy Young votes there. Eli, what have you seen from Kodai Senga?
Yeah, he's been for months now. The entire second half of his season, he's been on the short list of very best pitchers in baseball. And he was decent in the first half as well, as the Marlins found out in person. But he's been, especially lately, the change has been that he is still efficient, even with all the pitches he throws out of the zone and all the strikeouts he gets. He's been so dominant, allowing so few base runners, that he's working deep into games really consistently, averaging well over 6 innings to start if you look at the second half of his season. Any way you slice it, he's been terrific. Even on a per inning basis, you could say he's been better than Yuri as a season overall. He's finishing very strong. And unfortunately for the Marlins, he is signed long-term by the Mets, so they'll have to contend with him in future years as well. He certainly stands out of this group more so than Jose. I looked at the pronunciation. It is Jose Butto. That's how he pronounces it, Butto. And then we have Joey Lucchesi in the middle game. He hasn't been available very much, but at least he's pitching well when he has been healthy.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. Oh, wow.
Yeah, small sample size. And we have Braxton in there for the second game that the Marlins have pitched. So overall, it's a somewhat interesting alignment here with Edward. This is his first traditional start since being called back up. You'll remember he was used after an opener each of the previous 2 times. You don't know what you're going to get from Edward, except you usually know you're going to get several walks in there. You just don't know whether it's going to be 2 walks or whether it's going to be 6 walks or somewhere in between. So this is what I should note about this Mets lineup, even though it's kind of still talented with the infusion of younger guys, there are also less disciplined guys in here. So people may remember that when Edward faced the Mets early in the year in both of his first 2 starts, he was walking everybody. It was a big issue. He couldn't work deep into those games. This matchup is a little bit more favorable to him. I think you're going to see more guys here, guys that will, once you get past that top 4, you have other guys that are a lot less disciplined and will chase pitchers out of the zone and will help him out with that. That's somewhat of a reason for optimism. At the same time, it's also a reason, I think, to hold him to a higher standard. If this is anything like what Edward was in his previous outing, and also if you go back to his previous outing against the Mets, then I think that's a reason to be concerned and a reason to have limited trust in him moving forward the rest of this year. I think this is there aren't a ton of excuses at this point for him not challenging hitters and making that big adjustment that adjustment just has not stuck for him. But these last few starts of this season, playoff ramifications aside, if Edward really wants to be taken seriously as a rotation candidate moving forward, he needs to have some of these outings where he shows that he can at least control his stuff and live with the results that happen when he throws pitches in the strike zone. So to me, he is going to be the most interesting pitcher to watch on either side during this series, is to see how he responds and how he matches up with this lineup that is a mix of the steady veterans, but also these guys, impatient rookies that he should be able to take advantage of.
Listen, I don't know what we're going to get from the Mets lineup. I mean, as I mentioned before, there are several names there that could really hurt us, but we cannot let their pitchers, today's and tomorrow's, dominate us. I mean, that's no way. Butto and Lucchesi, we cannot let them go 6 innings, 1 earned run. No, I mean, that can't happen. Not at this stage. They struggled at AAA. They haven't necessarily struggled at the MLB level, but they've been lucky. So yeah, at this point, you have to make them pay. That's my main kind of feeling. Like, okay, yeah, they still have a good lineup. They can make things happen between the veterans and the young kids with the lineup. But you know, these 2 guys today, tomorrow, they just can't dominate our lineup.
I'll be shocked if Cabrera gets a no-hitter. So, alrighty. So we're coming down to the wire here. I forgot to mention very quickly, Sandy did throw that second bullpen. I know that was a big thing. Nice to see that happen. He mentioned that he feels like, he feels really good. He incorporated all of his pitches today in that bullpen. He said he felt good, and hopefully maybe next week we maybe see Sandy.
You take it just one step at a time. So we'll have to face live hitters, and then realistically, you have to wonder how stretched out he's going to be. I don't think it's realistic.
He goes into a rehab.
There's nowhere to rehab soon because the minor league season is coming to an end. It's just AAA Jacksonville for a little bit of a window. I don't think you're going to get the full Sandy experience either in these last couple weeks or in the postseason. I think he's going to be on a bit of a pitch limit there. It's just one step at a time with this UCL thing. It's such a delicate thing. You never know when that setback is going to occur. This has been these couple weeks since he got that news has fortunately been a somewhat of a best case scenario where he's totally pain free and he's progressing. That's good. We just talked about this on the Spaces yesterday. Kevin actually wasn't there, so Kevin wouldn't know. But we were on the Spaces yesterday. We went through it a little bit, and just you need to have no expectations on Sandy the rest of the way. Anything you get from him is a huge bonus just because of the nature of UCL issues. And they absolutely need to ensure that he's not going to do anything that puts that ligaments in serious jeopardy and leads to obviously surgery or something of that nature. But so far, so good. Just one step at a time. Realistically, just get him in a position to give you something in the postseason if you make it to the postseason. But you can't rely on him to get you to that point. You need to just focus on the other pitchers on the staff in the meantime.
All right, so with that being said, we're just coming down to the wire. Let's quickly go through our predictions. So if you want, hit the video.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
All righty, so we're just gonna. Do we even have time to look at the standings if you want to?
Yes, we got a couple minutes to make sure we go through all the appropriate steps and recognize what our super subscribers are thinking. Because I'm somewhat surprised by what they went with here. Very heavy optimism in the Marlins coming off of that series sweep of the Braves, and especially in Jorge Soler. One game back, hits a home run, and you have half of the predictions singling him out as the MVP in this. All season long, our super subscribers have been making these predictions with us. So if you guys want to get involved down the stretch, or obviously in future seasons or in the postseason, I'm sure we'll do prediction time in the postseason if applicable. Yeah, you just sign up at fishonfirst.com. It's right near the top of the page for you guys to find it and fill it out. But yeah, somewhat surprised to see all the optimism here. It is Williams for the moment that holds a 1-point lead on our leaderboard ahead of Daniel and ahead of Grant. Speaking of which, we could go to the prediction video that Daniel sent in from the ballpark.
All right, we're here for predictions. I'll go first for Alex Krutchik. He has Marlins 2 out of 3, and Luis Arias is MVP. I'm going to go the same, but Marlins 2 out of 3, and my MVP is going to be Mr. Jake Berger. And here is our special guest wearing the same shirt, Alex Aguirre.
And just want to mention as well, Alex is in the press box hiding because he's wearing a green shirt as well, and he's too scared to admit the fact that we all planned this out. So on my decision is the Marlins going to take 2 out of 3 in this series, and my MVP is Jorge Soler. That home run yesterday is just the beginning of a hot streak.
I just like how Mark Vianzo's casually just passed right behind him. All right, so let's start with our guest game. Once Eli puts him in the solo shot.
Go ahead, Dan.
I like that 2 out of 3. I agree. And I'm going to give a different one. I'm going to be a good one. Edward Cabrera is going to be amazing today. He's going to be the series MVP.
Oh, Edward. Okay. I will go Marlins sweep. And usually I don't take starting pitchers, but I feel really good about Yuri going up against this Mets lineup. Obviously, he should be fairly familiar with a lot of these guys, Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Beatty, Francisco Alvarez, all guys he's seen in the minor leagues. So we're going to go with Mr. Yuri Perez as my series MVP.
All of you are falling for the trap, man. The Mets are going to win this series. They are going to upset the apple cart, play spoiler, win 2 out of 3 against the Marlins. I have Jeff McNeil winning MVP, somewhat of a terrible season by his standards this year, but recently more of the kind of pesky hitter that we've known him to be as recently as 2022. I think you get a vintage Jeff McNeil performance, a couple key hits late in the game that turn 2 of those 3 in the Mets' favor, unfortunately.
Alrighty, we're coming down right to the wire here. We're going to let you all grab your popcorn, whatever you eat during the game. From Eli, Danny DeVivo, Isaac Azut, who was in here, Daniel Rodriguez, Alex Krutchik from the press box. We'll see you guys all on Friday. Peace out and go fish.